It's going to pehले तो मैं मर जाऊंगा. Ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? You know, there's something that I can't tolerate is emulation slander. Now, I want you to sit on Uncle Muda's lap over here. I'm going to tell you a story about the time Uncle Muda wanted to play a video game, and it was just too fucking expensive. So there's this game called Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner Soul Hackers. It was originally out for like the PlayStation 1. I saw that it was re-released on the old 3DS. Well, I had a 3DS sitting right over here. So I was thinking to myself, man, can I buy this game anywhere? It doesn't seem to be officially selling on any storefront by Nintendo or the actual person. So I was like, oh wait, let me check out the third-party market. Maybe it's there for a reasonable price. Oh, look at that. $61? $75? $90? $82? $94? Ooh, I don't know if I feel comfortable paying those prices for a pre-owned 3DS game. Now, I'm not exaggerating on this. I would rather die, like the title of this video implies, before I ever get caught paying loose prices for Pokemon Fire Red over $140. Complete pricing for $372, and the new pricing, well, I mean, I can imagine new being $1,255. Especially when you could probably get this game now officially for literally a fraction of this price. Again, I play video games. I'm not in the market for retro game collectibles that literally are this expensive because, again, private sellers are, well, just being private sellers. And let's not even get into the market of things like Pokemon trading cards, where, again, the prices astronomically fly up. At least over here, we can emulate the games and play them as God intended. Now, for legal reasons, Uncle Muda can't tell you the next part of this story, but I actually read something online that kind of burned me a little bit. So one of the things that came out was just emulate it. Have you considered I want to play it on real hardware with real connectivity features and not sat at my desk in perma offline mode? Now look, I'm sitting at my desk, okay? But don't ever let a buddy stop you from letting you know it's super easy to hack a 3DS and play the games that you want right here. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I made a video showing you guys how to hack one of these. I even showed you guys how to hack a Wii U. Typically, when these stop being supported by Nintendo or really anybody, I think it's a great piece of hardware to pick up. But it's actually expensive to go buy original hardware. Yeah, I made a video not too long ago on another product, by the way, called the AIM Thor, for instance, this little handheld that I see. And for the light version, that's $249. Now, for the light version, you can actually emulate, DS, 3DS games with that dual screen functionality. And you know what the super cool part about this stuff is, too? Is that if you have a Game Boy Advance game, you can actually run one Game Boy Advance game on this screen, one on this screen, and you might be like, well, that sounds kind of crazy, Muda, but what if you wanted to trade between versions using the same device? Yeah, it's actually entirely possible with the power of emulation. So obviously, do I think that you should get an original 3DS, or should you just get a device that can emulate a lot more than this system and basically have like full Android functionality? You know, one of the reasons I even talked about Android like side loading, and no, I'm not going to use the language of the enemy, installing your own applications, is that really a lot of these Android handhelds, in a lot of cases, if you can pick them up cheaper than like a Steam Deck, there's a lot of game to be done over here. But yeah, anyways, I read that entire statement, and it seems like the anti-emulation community is pretty much just there. Now, granted, there has actually been a little bit of a rise. For anybody that hasn't known, Nintendo recently released Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green on the actual Switch 2 for like 30 Canadian a pop. Not like bundled together, no, each game separately. Now, for me, I don't really care. If you look at the prices for Fire Red and Leaf Green, that ain't actually a bad price to officially buy the game. However, I'm not going to buy an emulated version of a game that I can't speed up, or I can't even, play multiplayer with over the internet, which I think is pretty goddamn important. When people talk about real connectivity features, it makes me wonder just how much misinformation sort of flies around. For anybody that doesn't know, Nintendo's Wi-Fi connection, which actually used to power the DS, actually ended up being unsupported. Like, Nintendo shut that shit down. Thankfully, because of people that literally like to preserve video games, it was brought back to the DS and the DSi in a way where you actually don't even need to have a modded DS. You can just follow these simple instructions, modify your Wi-Fi settings, use this DNS, and whoa, you're playing online again without the help of Nintendo or anybody else. You know, when it comes down to like the community preserving video games, this is Wii MMFI, which allows you to play games like Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Heart Gold, Soul Silver with full fucking online support. In fact, if you look at Mario Kart Wii, not that I play this game anymore, there's still somehow 200 people playing this online together. There's a whole amount of people playing Super Smash Bros. Melee online with each other using an emulator. And of course, let's not forget just net play and how important it is. Like back in the days of the original PlayStation 2 and Xbox, when a lot of those servers started going offline, projects like X-Link High, Game Ranger, you know, there's projects like Insignia, which has actually brought back the original Xbox Live for the original Xbox and emulators in such a fashion that both the people can play together now, okay? So if you have one buddy that's playing Halo 2 on an emulator and you're playing Halo 2 on an Xbox, you guys can play together. You know, in fact, right now, as we speak, 80 people are online right now. There's 10 motherfuckers playing Counter-Strike right now on this system. There's people playing Halo 2 on this system. You ever played Phantasy Star Online Episode 1 and 2? I have, with other players on Insignia. So yeah, I do kind of want to talk about this stuff because generally I don't like it when emulation gets a bunch of misinformation around it. But also, there's just a lot of games that end up getting re-released that don't even have the content that they originally shipped with. For instance, I love GTA San Andreas, one of my favorite games. Now, obviously, there's a definitive edition that's out there, and if you go to Steam, for instance, and you look up San Andreas, which obviously it's a game very important to me, they used to actually have the original PC version on here. They don't actually have the original PC version that you can buy. The only one that you can buy is the fucking definitive crap hole for $80 Canadian. Now, granted, this comes with all three original, like, PS2 era games, and sure, they might be visually nicer, but they actually have severe aura loss compared to the original PlayStation 2 game. And not to mention the fact, when the music gets cut out from these games, that's actually a big chunk of the atmosphere, especially for a GTA title. And thankfully, due to emulation, you can actually play the game as it originally shipped out. You know, when we're talking about gaming features, San Andreas came with a 2-player mode that I don't know if many people understood, but there was actually 3 pickups in all 3 cities of the game. And if you knew where they were, you could basically go to them, connect a second controller, and you can actually play with your friends. Me and my brother used to put the, riot cheat code where everything was just going full mayhem, war everywhere, and we used to just survive in San Andreas together playing this game. It actually brings back a lot of nostalgia, actually. And a lot of this is still only possible now if you whip out the emulator. Now again, granted, you can still dig out the original PS2 hardware, but hardware eventually does die, okay? There's not really a lot of PlayStation 2s that I can find right off the rip. There are some retro game stores that I can go to, but generally the quality on some of these PlayStation 2s is questionable at best, right? Like if somebody sells you a $50 PlayStation 2 and it looks like the previous owner literally stuck it between their ass cheeks, shit something into the disc tray, and decided to put that on the market, do you really want to be wasting your fucking money on that and calling it a day? Now sit on Uncle Muda's lap again and let me tell you a story of another game I wanted to actually play. Now, of course, if you saw earlier, I was playing some Pokemon Soul Silver, kind of at the very beginning of the game, actually just started emulating it, but it actually did ship with something known as a Pokewalker. I wanted to try this thing out again, but I was like, damn, $156 fucking dollars for Poke Tamagotchi? I can actually experience a little bit of it on the actual emulator right over here. So again, a lot of the stuff that I like to experience, once again, is at least somewhat preserved through this process. But let me walk you through another game. There's this title called Racing Lagoon, and I'm pretty sure nobody at Square Enix knows they even fucking made this game. But this is a $66, $68 on average, sometimes up to $100 Japanese-only PlayStation 1 game. Now, I'd have to buy the the disc, and then I'd have to go and buy a Japanese PlayStation 1 because, fucking region locking is a thing. But it's actually a great game. See, I love playing video games. I actually found out about this through some guy's online blog where they discussed this game. They talked about the story. Apparently the story for this game, I'm actually playing through it right now. It consists of like government conspiracies, street racers. It's a street racing JRPG for the PlayStation 1, right? Like it's got the full PlayStation 1 vibes. The music is immaculate. It takes you back to the 90s, bro. And the story for it is just filled with, again, government conspiracies, racers ending up dead, some blowing their brains out. It's crazy shit. It's an insane storyline that I can't wait to experience because thankfully emulators like DuckStation exist. This game is available on the internet, even if it's not officially legally being sold by the original developers. I think one of the things with retro video games is, for me, I don't care if there's a gaming crash. Like, it doesn't really affect me because I have so many video games in my backlog that I could never finish them at all as time goes on. I understand the sentiment people have for original hardware, I really do, but the sort of anti-emulation stance where people sort of look at emulation as if it's like some weird dirty way to play, or if it doesn't actually end up supporting the developers. I think people should understand that when these systems get so old, and when games aren't legally being sold anymore, that also doesn't affect and help the developers or publishers anyways. If anything, it only benefits a secondhand market of people that literally have found a way to price gouge and upcharge in some cases, a lot of these video games, right? Now, granted, if you're a collector, it's super cool for you to go out and get like a physical copy of a video game. I am not a game collector. I buy physical video games simply because if I'm going to spend $60 on something, I can physically own on a disc without needing an internet connection and playing that game and sharing it with friends versus paying the exact same amount of money for a digital license that, I don't have that level of freedom with, it doesn't matter. It's one of the reasons why I love physical media. I don't fuck with game key cards for things like Nintendo Switch 2s. I don't fuck with physical media that isn't even completed on a disc. It's one of the reasons why I haven't even bought an Xbox game on physical disc at all. I would have loved to buy a copy of Starfield or even Oblivion Remastered, but I didn't because Xbox doesn't release those games fully on disc physically. Whereas I think the only developer right now or publisher that releases their games fully on a disc is probably just PlayStation. And even then, I think that shit might be fucking fleeting at this point, right? But that's kind of my stance on it. I think if you're a gamer, the last thing you ever want is demonizing of emulation, because it's really just through emulators that a lot of people are actually able to play older fucking video games. And it's not just emulators bringing back old video games, bringing them back with even online functionalities, but for a lot of people that love shit like achievements, and I really do like achievements and trophies, like I'm not as big of an achievement hunter as I was like when I was a teenager, obviously as age has come by, but I love whenever the fucking achievements pop up in the corner and I'm chasing after a little digital checklist. I get that rush. I like it. And a lot of sites like Retro Achievements allow you to input this into a repository of 10,000 plus games across various emulators and various different game systems, and actually let you play games like Resident Evil 2 again with achievements to kind of shoot for, right? That is the stuff that I really, really do enjoy watching. And it's one of those things with like this emulation like craze that I'm so defensive and like adamant of it, right? I think if you're a gamer, especially if you're somebody that is like a young gamer, like if you're in your like 18 years of age or like your 20s, it's crazy to think, right? Like with Resident Evil 9 dropping, I think if you were 19 now, you'd have to be like 12 or whatever, or 13 when like Resident Evil 7 came out. So you were actually not even born when, the original PlayStation 1 versions of those games came out. So I think it's important to have emulators like still be around and still be easily accessible because it lets people just download a file onto their computer and relive an era of gaming that normally would be prohibitively expensive for them to access if they had to rely on purchasing hardware and the actual physical discs. Buying old PlayStations and buying old PlayStation games or buying old games and hardware does no benefit to the actual industry other than these third-party resellers that are gouging the shit out of these to begin with. I used to somewhat buy original, like, I used to buy old PlayStation 1 games. I used to buy like some old PS2 games, but that purchasing for me has dried up simply because of how much some people are actually charging for some of these things. I'm not going to pay $100 for Soul Hackers on the 3DS, especially when I know Atlas or none of the people are benefiting from that. I will, however, get it somewhat on my actual device here and play it on a 3DS-like handheld, because I can just put pretty much my entire library on this and carry it around me anywhere that I go. And not only that, but the actual screens on this, the controls on this, are substantially better than even original hardware in some cases. So, I don't know, it's just a net positive to have emulation be a thing, but I'm still shocked we live in a world where it's just constantly being like eternally demonized in some way. Look, emulating is great. There's games like Bloodborne that'll never be re-released for PC, never be given a 60 frame patch, but if you get yourself Shat PS4 and, you spend like a couple hours, I even show you how to do this on my channel, you can get Bloodborne running with 60 frames per second and play the entire game all the way through, even accessing some of those like online-based dungeons through like third-party tools, and just have the game right there. And the thing about emulation is it's something that is preserved till basically the end of time. Emulation is just software, and software you can download decades down the road on whatever future operating system you use and have a good time. And the thing about it too is like it's gotten so easy that anybody, I think the technical barrier for emulation is so reduced when handheld PCs are a thing now. And downloading one script programs that basically take care of literally every aspect of it. The installation of the emulators, the file structure, the various CRT filters some people enjoy having. All of the stuff is done pretty much for anybody. Like, it's done in one simple script. I think the barrier of entry is gone. And I think that's pretty much the real future. Now, obviously, there is one final pivot to this stuff that I really find important. One of the things is a lot of companies don't re-release some of their older titles anymore, and they just completely let them forgotten. But the other thing I find is with emulation, and at least with game preservation, is it somewhat protects us in some ways from some of the most predatory shit that I've ever seen when it comes to gaming. Like the other day, I saw this come out from Sony, where apparently a site called psprices.com used their API to find out that Sony was testing things like A/B pricing in November 2025 and maybe beyond that. And they basically found that in certain areas, games would be priced higher or lower. So, for instance, this is what we call dynamic pricing. So, for instance, if you see like a saving, sometimes there could be a bigger saving. Sometimes not even in a different region, it could just be a saving for a different person. So you might inadvertently pay more for something that somebody else is paying less for. Now, I think this is scummy behavior. I think when a lot of these companies purchase into things like artificial intelligence, like Walmart, I think when a lot of these retailers are using AI to see exactly what time and which place people are buying things and dynamically pricing things, not regional pricing, not like, hey, the cost of living is a lot higher in this area, like people's salaries are higher in the United States as opposed to, I don't know, some random like no-name European country. So let's price things a little bit different so that people here can afford games on their salary in relation to people there. No, dynamic pricing is one of those things where a lot of these companies use AI to sort of look at like what the surge timings for things can be, what they can price for. I think that is really disgusting behavior, and I think it should be illegal if some individuals are unnecessarily paying more, even in their same region, than some other user is, because these people have found out how to min-max the money on individuals. And one of the reasons I kind of talk about this with emulation is that even when it comes to games being re-released and officially supported, if I ever saw this behavior happen in a storefront where like a retailer was selling like, I don't know, Chrono Trigger for like $20 for one user and then $40 for another, at that point, I think it's ethically okay to just go onto an internet site and find that fucking game sitting around. Because in some cases, a lot of these games aren't even re-released with proper emulators. And in other cases, I think when the industry is this ass backwards when it comes to giving gamers their value, it shouldn't be supported by the person. And ultimately, I think if that's the future of gaming where things are so hyper monetized, then I think a lot of gamers do benefit themselves, especially right now when things are so expensive, to just go back to the world of original emulators for the PS2 era. Hell, honestly, if you're a gamer that's young, pick any system that you never experienced in your life. Honestly, I'll start you off PlayStation 2. Pick any system, go in there, find the top 10 games, play them, and honestly compare them to stuff that releases nowadays. I'm pretty sure I think most gamers, even of today's day and age, will find that older titles were just a lot better in general. And honestly, a lot of those older titles are only available because emulation exists. Because a lot of these companies do a dog shit job of preserving their older libraries as compared to the fucking gamer. Anyways, rant done, ladies and gentlemen. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'm gonna go play some more Racing Lagoon. I am out.